Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Enable Community Foundation Internship Roundtable. This week, as we've done in the past couple of weeks, we're going to follow up on the ECF interns to find out what's been going on this week and how their work is going. We're a little, because of the holiday weekend, we've moved this to Tuesday. Generally, we meet on a Monday, and we're a little short-staffed today because of the holiday weekend. But we're very happy. We're going to hear from Rice and from the University of Florida, and we're going to start off with Chris and Nikhil at Rice. So who's first of you two?
I'll go.
Okay.
So we, in the last week we were talking about some problems that we had developing our circuit with the multiplexers, and we uploaded our circuit diagram and we're asking for some help. Well, the next day we actually found what we think was the problem. The Arduino has two different types of pin input. One is a digital input and one is an analog. We had the circuit wired correctly but plugged into the wrong pins, which caused a big difference in how everything was read, but they don't tell you that anywhere. So we finally figured that out, and we also realized because we're using a motor shield to drive our stepper motor to move the palm to make force senses, the motor shield runs on a different operating voltage than does the rest of the Arduino. So when you plug in pins to the motor shield, it converts them all to the same scale, which is 0 to 1023. It converts it all on the computer. But it does that regardless of whether it's 0 to 12 or 0 to 5. So we're trying to read things on a 0 to 5 scale voltage, but it's actually reading it on a 0 to 12 scale, which messes everything up because it doesn't tell you which is trying to read. So that took a while to figure out. But we finally got that, so now we have a working, more or less, testing rig. We just finished printing a couple of new hands. We have now a, let's see, what do we do? We have a larger hand for one of our patients. We just finished assembling that. We're working right now on getting semiflex. Akil, I was going to update you. Here's your update. The semiflex we have is too large. We need a smaller one, so I just ordered that.
Cool.
Someone emailed us about how to print semiflex, so hopefully we're going to figure out a way to dry it and use it. I think Eric, does that sound right? Eric emailed us.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool.
So hopefully get that done the next couple of days, and then we're going to test. We have 4 hands that we can test to figure out which one has the best grip retention. And those are a high infill density, a low infill density, the semiflex hand, and one with thicker hinges between the fingers. So that's about where we are right now, working on calibrating some sensors for the testing rig.
Yeah, so as Chris talked about, the main sort of hurdles we have left is to calibrate the sensors. And so the idea behind that is that the sensors themselves change resistance based on the force you apply to it, and it's supposed to change resistance linearly. But the issue is that we don't really know an exact sort of baseline for what force equals what initial resistance, and so that's what the calibration curve is supposed to establish. So once we have that, we can then convert the resistance and then the resulting voltage change into a force reading. And so we're working on doing that, and then we're also working on we have printed out a paddle which can basically drive the hand and drive them to be closed. And so we're just working on assembling all the final components before we can begin testing.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm going to put the camera back on. I know that Eric and Trisha are going to be really interested, especially in when you start getting results, because they're already doing some testing. And we've asked them to do one of your hands, print one of your hands, or so that we can see how their testing goes compared to how your testing goes. So
yeah, that'd be interesting.
I'm sorry that they're not here today, but they're going to be really excited. And it would have been Eric, her PI, who would have written to you about the semiflex.
Right. And they're using the non-flexi, though, right? The regular Iron hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see what the results are there. So I'm looking forward to that. Does anybody have anything else for Chris and Akil? No. Okay, we'll move over to Jessica.
Okay. Hey guys. So last week I showed you some of the designs I was working on, and this week I got them printed and then realized what was wrong with them, so I went back and changed those designs.
No.
So this is the one that was printed last week. If you remember, the one I showed you is basically the thermoformable forearm piece that wraps around the PVC here at the top and has all these holes coming around it. So the PVC, we drill holes in the PVC, sort of like so, if you can see those tiny little holes. But ideally there'll be holes all around this whole diameter of this thing. And then it goes down and goes into these holes also. And we have just a wing nut that goes around it, so you can just hit it and come off. And so this bicep cup here is also thermoformable, and it turned out pretty good. It's a little bit wonky the first time, like thermoforming it, trying to get a perfect shape. So this week, some of the things I found that was wrong with it was that I definitely need to create a jig, and I've started working on a jig so I can get the angle between these two pieces just right. Because if it's off a little bit, then you've got a really, really wonky thing here where it slides in and out of the piece just like that. And then a jig that will come out to the top of this so that we can get that nice circular, really good shape on there. And then, actually, let me show you the jig that I'm making real quick. Okay, can you guys see me? Or see the screen, rather?
We can see the screen.
Okay, so these are some of the changes that I've made. So I made another V here in the elbow, like similar to the one I had on the bicep cup, but this time just for the forearm, just because when I tried it on myself, it was a little bit tight, so I thought I'd just make as much room as possible. And then you can kind of ignore this slot. I'm not sure why it's doing that. But another change was that I just made these holes a little bit bigger because they're not fitting the size screw that I wanted right now, so I just had to change the screw size. And then I made the bicep cuff extend farther back to get a little bit more stability between this here. And then if you can see this circle where it's connecting the two is coming out in sort of a little bridge, just so you'll have a little bit more wiggle room in that elbow because it's hard. And then another thing that I found is that when I drilled the holes in the PVC and it was wrapping around the PVC, it didn't wrap around all the way. So I extended this out, and the idea is now that the screw is going to come through this first hole and come around and extend back through the last hole. That way you can get a much tighter grip on it and be hopefully a lot more stable. And then I was just working on the jig, and this is like the very first prototype jig. So right now it's a circular tube basically, which is a little bit less than the diameter of the PVC that I'm using. And then the idea is that these holes in the end will match up with just 4 of them, so it can wrap around to get that nice circle. And then it's just tapered as you go along here with the angles coming down. But I can already see that it's going to be really hard to print this, just because you have to print it standing up, and it'd be a lot of support material coming all the way in. And so I'm just trying to find a way that would make it would reduce the support material basically, without losing the circle at the end. So obviously I could cut this in half pretty much and do this whole half be just resting on the plate, but then this still needs to be circular, so you can't really print it standing up anymore. Let's see, what else did I do? Oh, I made the whole thing thicker because it seemed a little bit too thin for me. Right now, before, the first time I printed it, it was 0.075 inches thick. So I almost doubled that thickness and made it 0.13 inches thick. And hopefully that'll help with the stability problem. Because it did hold the PVC pretty well. I just want to make sure there's anything that has some real mass to it in the end. It's not going to be wiggling around at all. You're going to have a really stable product in the end. And so I'm also working on a jig. It should be just a really simple, like bare bones jig for the bicep piece. Hopefully I can reduce a lot of material on that one, because I know the jig for the unlimited bicep right now is kind of large actually, and I think all you really need is just like 4 points connected with 2 arches. So that should be pretty good. And then, oh yeah, so when I tried it on, actually, I tried it on myself, and since it was thermoformed and it printed everything was flat, and mine printed on Fusion, which the bed of the Fusion is really, really nice and like extremely sleek. So when I tried it on, I didn't feel the need to have any padding. I know we put padding on some of the unlimited arms, but I think with this we can actually eliminate padding totally, hopefully. And then, oh yeah, so I'm trying to decide whether I want to continue with the, here, I'll close this out. So right now, there we go. Right now I've been using 1-inch PVC, because that's just what we started off with for no real reason. And we kind of go back and forth between 1-inch and 1/2-inch PVC. And so I'm trying to decide if I want to continue with the 1-inch or just go down and make everything attached to 1/2-inch PVC. And so that kind of comes down to what age of kids I think I'm going to be using this and how large they are and how much they can control it. Or if I should just end up making one that fits 1/2-inch PVC and one that fits 1-inch PVC. So that's about it for this week. Oh, I found a recipient too. Someone who we had previously made a device for, and so he's going to be trying this on in 2 weeks. Hopefully once I've cleaned it up a lot. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. What kind of force is the jig piece going to be taking?
What do you mean?
So, like maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying correctly, but like just looking at your design, one possible concern could be like there's like some pieces that you have, the circular pieces that come out of like the main rod,
Yeah.
and it looks like those pieces may snap off easily. It depends on what kind of force you anticipate this taking.
So the jig is just for thermoforming it to get the right shape.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So have you seen the jig for the forearm, for the unlimited arm?
Not really, no.
Well, actually, there's only a jig for the bicep, but for the forearm, they say to just use like a rolling pin. But I thought since the end of this really needs to be like the perfect shape,
I see.
you're putting PVC in it. It's just so when you have this flat and put it in the water, just you want those points to match up, so you can get your general like tapered shape.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
That's why I wanted to make it as small as possible too, so you're not wasting filament on something that you're really only using one time.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because the unlimited arm, it's got that big jig for doing the one piece, but then we've just used a rolling pin, or you can even use like a hairspray can.
And that makes sense because that makes sense for the limited arm because it changes the degree. Like you want to end at 90 degrees, so you're starting here and ending here, so it's really hard to make a jig for that. But I'm hoping that because mine isn't like that. And so that's one thing that I encountered this week too, was that the unlimited forearm is a parallelogram where it starts at these 2 points and the other 2 points are off-centered to it over here. And I was trying to decide if that was something that I should continue with or if there's a real reason for that. And I think it's just because if you can see here, if this is straight, then this is going to end up not straight because it's not a parallelogram, it's just a square, like a normal square with all the points lining up. And so I was kind of debating in my head whether I should continue with that parallelogram where it's going to go off and make this actually straight. But when I was trying it on myself, I didn't really find any problem with it in the actual shape. Actually, I have some photos of myself wearing it in a sec.
Well, before you do that, I've got actually sitting right here a forearm piece from the. That's what the one looks like.
Yeah, so you've got the 2 points, but they're just offset like that.
Right.
So that when you actually thermoform it, it is pretty straight.
Right.
Well,
when
as far as straight,
do it around, I don't think I'll look around and see if I have a jig here for it.
Yeah.
But that's anyone who hasn't seen it. This is what it looks like before it's thermoformed.
But if you look at mine, it's just like a normal square coming off, except for the fact that this piece is out. Yeah. So
if you want to get those pictures, I'm just going to see if I've got a jig here just so people can see what it looks like.
Yeah, so if you can see this one on me, I had plenty of room, and if you ignore like my hand part here because it's kind of cinching there, so I just wanted to make more room for the elbow here, and then we're not going to be using Velcro, I don't think. We're trying that thing that I was talking about last week where it's like a belt that has 2 little clasps on it, and you just put them through the 2 clasps. Let's see. Yeah. So I'm obtaining one of those this week, where it just kind of laces through like the shoelace I was talking about last week, and then you cinch it back through those 2 little clasps. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the lacing mechanism you showed us.
Yeah.
When you were first starting out, right?
Yeah, like the belt that you just put through and then kind of pull back. I just haven't gotten to try that out yet.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any other questions for Jessica?
Oh, and then just the printing times. So if you were to print this on, and this was one thing that I was debating also, is that at 100%, this doesn't fit on a MakerBot, which I know a lot of people use, especially in enabling the future community. But then something else I thought about was that the unlimited form also doesn't fit on a, like at 100%. I'm pretty sure it doesn't fit on a MakerBot either. And so it wouldn't really be feasible for me to break this up into 2 pieces just because of how you're thermoforming the shape and how you want it to match up. And so I figured that if you're going to be printing it, you'd be printing it not on a MakerBot, on a plate that would be big enough to fit it. But if you did print it...
When we've done the forearm bigger than our plate can handle, we actually do it in 2 parts. With
yeah.
A fingertail joint, like almost a dovetail joint, and then put it together and then thermoform it, and that works really well.
Okay.
Hang on, I've got one of those.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
So
it's like the puzzle piece. It's just like 2 pieces matching up like that, right?
Right. Here we go. Let me see if you'll be able to see this because it's black. That's the joint. So it's the 2 pieces. It's 2 pieces.
So you print them and put them together and then thermoform them?
Right. This has not been thermoformed yet, this one.
Okay, cool.
And it works pretty well. The glue, everything holds up. It's not been a problem.
Okay.
And
So
then
that's something I definitely do.
The joint itself ends up looking almost like a feature because it looks a little like a meander pattern. So that's one way you can get around if you've got a size issue, is to sort of split it into 2 pieces, print each part, and then put it together and then thermoform it. I can send you a link to the file on that, but I mean you'd have to amend it because obviously yours is a different shape, but I would think the same thing would work.
Yeah, it probably should.
Work. And the thermoforming with it isn't a problem at all.
Yeah. So basically for this week, I just want to really clean up the design a lot. I know it looks kind of bulky and not super appealing right now, but first I'm going to focus on the functionality and make sure that it can really grasp at PVC really well, and then try and make it a lot more aesthetically pleasing, hopefully, as well as make sure the jig is matching up scale-wise.
No, that sounds good. I look forward to, well, next week, actually, I won't be here. Next week, our internship call will be run by Caitlin Dwelly, who's our other person on the call here, who helps out, who's a foundation employee who does a lot of stuff, including does all the blog posts and all the social media, and does a lot of work on the website. So, hi, Caitlin.
Looking forward to it. It might not be as helpful as Justine, though. She has a lot more expertise, but I'm learning.
She's learning, and next week I won't be here, so she will be running the call, and I'll watch it when I get back. Okay, if we don't have anything else, that's going to wrap us up for this week. It's a little bit short. I'm glad that everyone who's able to be here was here, and we look forward to next week. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye,
Nice to meet you.
everyone.
Bye.
See ya.